So congratulations on your pub day. This is exciting.
This is exciting. Yeah, thank you all so much. I haven't been to Wisconsin in a little while. It's really it's chilly today, you know?
Yeah.
But it's legit. This book begins in January. So it's fitting that it's launching on a really cold day.
Yeah, it
So
does. The other thing too that I wanted to mention is True North also was a February Indie Next pick. So that means booksellers got early copies and voted for it. So it's also a February Indie Next pick, which is also exciting. The first thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is kind of interesting, is so Raft of Stars pubbed during COVID, March of 2021. So how has this day been different for you releasing a novel in non-COVID times?
yeah, this Raft of Stars did come out in the throes of it, so everything was online and in Zoom until later that year. This has been a lot of fun. This morning, I got to go be on the Morning Blend show out of Milwaukee. That was a real trip, great fun, and then I get to be here. Had a great dinner with Maxwell, so it's nice to do this in a human way. My sister-in-law made me cookies. Thanks to my brother in attendance. There's family members here, an aunt and uncle. Aaron, did you see our aunt and uncle are right behind you? Yeah. So it's great. Thank you all so much for being here. This is fantastic. This is more fun than Zoom.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely. So anyways, I'm glad we could kick this one off right. So I do something kind of strange. I'm one of these people that I start by reading the acknowledgments. I feel like you got a good idea about the author, and sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But I just wanted to read a little blurb from the beginning of Andy's acknowledgments because I really think this sets the scene for the whole book. So, this novel, True North, is a story very near to my heart. I grew up fishing and hiking a stretch of whitewater named Piers Gorge on the Menominee River, which forms parts of Wisconsin's northern border. After a tour in the U.S. Air Force, I returned home, started college on the GI Bill, and learned to guide whitewater rafts through Pierce Gorge during my summers off. Guiding whitewater rivers, learning to yield to the water instead of fight it, has become one of the central joys and metaphors in my life. I love the whitewater rivers, and I love the free spirited people who guide them, the Sams and Swamis and Chips and Moons and Randys. And I wanted to get this story right. And I think that really sets the scene for this book. The river is such a central character. The atmosphere created by northern Wisconsin and small town community. So do you want to speak a little bit to how that influenced you to write this book?
Yeah, Piers Gorge is a real space. So I wrote Raft of Stars. It takes place in the Northwoods in a fictional county called Maragami County. And when I finished writing Raft of Stars, I knew I wanted to keep writing about the North and the Northwoods and home. This one takes place in that same fictional county of Maragami County, but it's centered around a stretch of whitewater that actually exists, right? And I did come home from the Air Force, and I learned to guide whitewater boats on this stretch of beautiful river. Has anyone ever been to Piers Gorge, Norway, Michigan? I know my brother and my aunt and uncle most definitely have. Yeah, it's an absolute gorgeous place. It's my favorite place on earth. So I've been wanting to write about that river for a very long time. So this was an opportunity to do that. Um, I also wanted to write about raft guides for a very long time. So raft guides are kind of like this rafting, whitewater rafting in general. Who's been whitewater rafting? Yeah, okay, like that's terrific. Rafting is kind of like an inland surf culture, and there are some real characters who are river guides. So I often thought, man, those would be fun characters to write books about, right? Um, I like to tell stories around campfires about what the river guides did. So it was fun to put some of this into this novel. Yeah.
So, and on that note too, the theme of relationships and navigating life really are very symbolic with the rivers. And basically, a river guide, you're putting your life in their hands. They have to read what is coming to be able to make the right decisions. And if they make the wrong decisions, it could affect a lot of people's lives. So can you talk a little bit about that symbolism between the rivers and relationships and
Yeah, so I started guiding in college during my summers off in Pierce Gorge. Nowadays, my family and I live down near Dayton, Ohio. I teach at Wittenberg University, and I guide part-time on the Gully River and the New River down in West Virginia.
And actually, I'm gonna just interject here
Go.
too. The Gully is a dam release river and it's really hard to get certified on the Gully. So you just got certified this
Yeah,
past summer, so congratulations on that. It's a
thank you.
big thing.
Yeah, it sounds like a silly hobby. Like, what's your passion, Andy? Rivers and rubber boats, like it's kind of goofy, but to me, becoming a gully guide was absolutely this Everest moment.
It
Um,
is.
the gully guides that I've known in the past typically had gray beards or gray braids coming out of their rafting helmets, and they had learned how to flow with the river. Yeah, you can always tell a rookie river guide because they're all muscle, they're all panic, and they try to dig in and control the river, and they end up throwing their shoulders out. Whereas these old gully guides, these old salts would just flow as if they were sitting on park benches while the class 5 rivers erupted around them. And for the longest time, I thought, man, I want that, but I can't have that because I'm not ready. Now I'm like a little bit gray. You know what I mean? It's starting. People ask me if I diet this way, and I say, no, why would I purposefully dye in gray spots? But this year I got the opportunity to try out on the Gully River, and it was everything I thought it would be. I got to guide these storied, world famous rapids called Pillow Rock, or the 14-foot Sweets Falls, or the quarter-mile long Lost Paddle, and it was just this wonderful fall. Every single weekend for about the month of October and some of September, I was going to West Virginia for these training days. At the same time, I'm teaching a class called Wilderness Writers at Wittenberg University. And the core question in that class, we read books like My Side of the Mountain, Hatchet, Wild by Sherald Strayed, Endurance about Ernest Shackleton. And I love to teach the class because the primary question is, what do these people find in the woods? What do humans find in survival situations when they're out on the edges of things? And I love the class discussion. But then every Friday, I would quickly pack up my bags and head to this deadly gully river to like try to run it, right? And I was asking, what am I finding here? What are my kids finding here as they watch dad pack up and go off? So it kind of became this fall like a lesson in staying brave. I told my daughters, I said, dad is doing something that scares him, and it does, but I'm trying to be brave. And I think this one of the sweetest moments in the whole thing is when I came home and my kids were all up in it. They're like, Dad, are you going to check out? Are you going to get your checkout run, or are you still in training? Checkout run is when you finally make it. And I got that checkout run, and I came home and my daughter said, Dad, now you don't have to tell people you're trying to be a gully guide. You can just tell them you are. And I was like, yeah, yes, little Edith. Thank you. So really, yeah, that was a wonderful fall. Whitewater rivers have become major metaphors for life for me. So you mentioned the idea of yielding, right? For me, that has to do with the first half of life and second half of life. I've heard writers describe it that way. We're in our 20s and our 30s, and we're flexing and we're wrestling and trying to make life exactly the way we want it. And then we get humiliated enough and we fail enough where we realize, oh my gosh, like I'm throwing out my shoulder, right? Like a rookie river guide. I need to learn to yield like one of those gully guides. So I'm not there yet in life. You know what I'm saying? I'm still working toward it. But I love the metaphors that whitewater rivers provide. So True North is about fatherhood. It's about marriage. It's about conservation and whitewater rivers. All of those things started to become metaphors for each other while writing it. One example, and then I'll be quiet again.
This is your show.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Metaphors.
One example of a metaphor. It's been a long day. I was on TV today. No, I can't remember.
Okay,
You go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things we were going to
I
talk
just had
about
a
a little
huge
bit,
dinner. It was really good.
We were talking a little bit about how some of the things in the book he was finding were coming true. Did you want to talk about the deer scene in the beginning?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll tell the deer story. So, people have often asked, like, is the fiction based on life or is the life based on fiction? And that line gets blurry in weird ways. Yes, these characters are inspired by people I've seen. Piers Gorge is a real space. However, what I found as I started writing this book is that I and my family would begin to live out some of the experiences that I had written, which was really weird, like that Will Ferrell movie. So this story begins with a family who wants a fresh start. They're middle-aged, Sam and Swami Brecht. They've got 3 kids. They met as young river guides, and now they're in the throes of raising kids and paying bills, and they're in their 30s, and it's not quite as exciting as it was when they were river guides in love. So they want this fresh start. They want to save their family. So they pack up in this 26-foot camper with their 3 children and head north, having just purchased Woodchuck Rafting Company from Sam's eccentric uncle Chip, all right, who's sort of a stoned hippie river guide. This was for me for longest time like a daydream, a goal, right? I would often, I can't tell you how many hours I have sat in various workplace offices daydreaming about selling everything, cashing out retirement, buying a camper and a rafting company and just going for it. Yeah. Not going to happen. Like this was my way of being able to do that without destroying my actual family, you know? As Sam and Swami are headed north on their first, on their, I mean, they haven't even made it yet. They hit a deer and they just wreck the front end of this brand new Winnebago camper that they used their retirement to purchase. I wrote that scene and we got the book under contract with Echo Books. And then we were traveling north in our old crummy minivan. This was probably 2 to 3 years ago, I would say now. It was late October. We were coming north from Dayton. It was probably 9 o'clock at night or so. This was like hour 8.5 of our journey. It's tired. We've got a half hour left to go until Grandma's house. And we got this high mileage Toyota Sienna. You know what I mean? Like it was like taupe colored, rust colored. It looked like a big multivitamin. You know what I mean? Like the brakes shuddered. It was on its last leg, and we had been saving to get something new and safer for the family. The headlights were dim, which has to do with this story. So we're cruising up Highway 41 near Plymouth, I think, north of Milwaukee. And suddenly, you know, we're doing 65, 70, whatever. In the middle of the road is what? Of course. Yeah, a deer. But it's a dead deer. It's a big, already dead deer in the middle of the road. And there was a car in the lane to my side. It was a gravel shoulder this way. And I'm like, I'm doing 70 miles an hour. If I swerve into the gravel or swerve into this car, that's bad news. What do? Snap decision. I just have to straddle this thing as best as I can, right? So I do that. I'm not going to get too gross. Like, you don't have to cringe, okay? There was a large impact. And then wham, and my family starts screaming because what was that noise? We didn't know it, but it had ripped the exhaust pipe from the motors all the way to the back and crumpled it up underneath. So it's spraying a rooster tail of sparks out the back. My son is in the back seat screaming, Dad, it's on fire. And I'm doing like a Chris Farley, like, what's on fire? You know, and I'm jerking it over to the side of the road. Um, Long story short, the police came and we made it to grandma's house without exhaust pipes. This is like the loudest minivan that we've ever driven. We bundled the kids up in sweaters. We rolled the windows down because I'm like, there's no exhaust. I don't want to like asphyxiate everyone in the last 30 miles. So we made it. But yeah, I talked to my agent that weekend and told her the story. And she's like, your life is getting a little too much like True North. Please don't tell me you just bought a rafting company from your eccentric uncle. So
Love it. Well, obviously not the best way to start saving your marriage, hitting a deer. But the other thing, speaking of that, that was interesting to me is a big part of this book too also has to deal with conservation and what's happening in some of these small towns, both in Wisconsin and in West Virginia. In Wisconsin, it's the sulfide mines. In West Virginia, it's the mountaintop mining. And it's the choice these people in these communities have to make. They've lost their industry, they don't have jobs. What is the choice they make? Do they decide to let this mining company come in and sell this land that is probably the only big money they're going to see, jobs they might have? Or do they not let them come in? But knowing if they do, 10 years down the road, they probably have destroyed the land that means so much to them. So it's a really hard decision to make. And this is a big part of the book too. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
yes, absolutely. And I remember my metaphor. So this will link
Okay,
to it
we can do that.
actually.
Why don't we do that
It links
first?
perfectly. So yeah, one of the major threads in this book, when Sam and Swami get north with their limping Winnebago, one of the major problems is that woodchuck is in far worse repair than they thought, and their Uncle Chip is like far more inebriated than they thought, right? And it's going to need a lot of work. One of the other problems is there's a exploratory mining company trying to come in and sort of buy up riverbanks and do this mining. And Maxwell's absolutely correct. Like, what's the balance between an area's economic needs, which are real, and an area's environmental needs, which are also real? So it was interesting to explore that in this work. One of the ways that the river links up with the idea of mining, much like marriage, through metaphor. There's an idea in whitewater rafting culture called give up and square up. And I love it because it basically means face the music. If you're running sideways through some major rapid, paddling for your life away from that big boulder or that hole in the river, and you're trying to avoid it, there comes a point sometimes where for whatever reason you can't. You're going to hit it. And at that point, the best advice, says all of the gray-haired gully guides, is you got to give up and square up, which means stop running away and just turn downstream and square up to that hazard. It's so scary to have to do that in whitewater, right? You're like, I don't want to square up to that hazard. I don't want to hit it at all. But you don't want to hit it totally sideways and unprepared because then you're toast, right? I did this just in gully guide training this fall. I was in a rapid called Woods Ferry, and there's a big nasty boulder on the right hand side with a hazard called the juicer. Yeah. And it was like my third week of training. You shouldn't be anywhere near the juicer. You got to be this way. Right. And I got swept this way and I couldn't get away from it at all. And I'm trying to make my ferry paddling upstream, paddle, paddle, paddle. And it became very clear. I was like, we're not going to make it. So I gave up and I squared up. I turned downstream and we nosed up on the thing, which was far better than just nailing it sideways. Long story short, though, like our raft did get juiced. I and the other guide trainer were the only people left in the boat. Every single customer was out swimming through these gnarly holes and pits and whirlpools, right? And we're swirling down sideways. I'll tell this story and then I'll come back. And all these other river trips are watching this. So I feel like completely humiliated and embarrassed because I just did something that I shouldn't have even been on that side of the river to begin with. And as all these other river trips and guides are looking at me like, like, what is this guy doing? Our raft drifting slowly hits a sloped rock and stops dead. And I, with my feet tucked out, fall out backwards in front of everyone onto the sloped rock with my arms and legs up in the air like a turtle. And as I'm sliding headfirst and backwards into the water, I'm just asking like, why, right? And I recognized, so that was a good lesson to bring home in terms of you know, lessons in humility for the kids. It was fun to tell them about the time I got utterly spanked out there, right? And I didn't feel so proud. But giving up and squaring up became a metaphor for the entire book. What does it mean to give up and square up? I know what it means in Whitewater, but what does it mean in marriage? Huh, right? What does it mean in terms of the environment? Right? What does it mean to give up and square up? And honestly, it was a real question that I asked, as I was writing this thing. And like, it wasn't a question I already had the answers to. And it's actually a question I still don't know if I have all the answers to. But I think the one connection between them all that did come through is this, that moment when you're trying to make that decision. Do I give up or do I square up? Like that moment, it feels nearly impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of these decisions of, do we mine and make some money for 10 years, or do we make no money, right, and suffer the consequences of a poor economy, and potentially wreck our river, right, for 100 years or more? How do we give up and square up in these different areas of life? All of those decisions feel, while you're making them, impossible. This space of, I don't know if there's a good answer here. And I'm sure you've all been in that sort of situation where it's like, I don't have a clear, good answer. I can keep running or I can square up. I don't really want to do either, you know? Yeah.
Well, and that leads me into another question. One thing that I found to be really interesting in this book is um, there are a lot of very interesting male characters, but you have some really very strong female characters in this book too. We talked a little bit about this at dinner, but Swami, Sam's wife, is really doing her best to figure out the relationship and the children. Ranger Bonnie, who is in charge of the campsite they're at, is also the acting sheriff, and she's trying to navigate what's going on in this small town community. There's another character, Randy, his mother, Debbie, is a very strong woman. She's raised him on her own all her life and has done a lot of interesting things in this book single-handedly. And then lastly, Moon, who is one of the raft guides, doesn't come from the area, but yet she's the activist trying to help this town save themselves from this mining community. So I just found it really interesting in a book that you would think would be more predominantly male focused, has these very strong female characters.
Yeah. I don't know. It's not something I did deliberately, but reflecting on it, in Raft of Stars is the same way. Like the mother and the gas station attendant, Miranda and Tiffany, are the two strongest heroes in the book, and Sheriff Cal is like the bumbling fool in the woods, right? There are similarities here. Sam, the husband, is the bumbling fool who like cashes in and buys the camper and thinks it's going to be great, right? He has these big visions and plans. I think part of that might be because I find it easier to pick on myself than others, right? Like I know I've been a bumbling fool, and I don't want to paint the female characters in the book in that sense. It's like easier for me to pick on my own, so to speak. Maybe I have to think that through. The other thing though is that Whitewater is not actually all that male dominated, surprisingly.
Yeah, it's changed a lot.
Yeah. So one of the main gully guide trainers, her name is actually she's a a middle school teacher. And in the summer, she guides rafts. Yeah? Word. Yes. You know what they call her? They call her the gully goddess. And she's one of the most storied, like successful river guides out there. And strong women on the rivers seem to make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it does make a lot of sense.
The guides were fun to write, really fun to write, because guides, like I said before, inland surf culture, they're rich. Yeah, rich, beautiful people. Mark Twain said in his book, Life on the Mississippi, he talked about how, these loggers who float these log rafts downstream, and these riverboat captains and so on and so forth are so fascinating, but no one's ever told their story, And I remember reading that in Mark Twain, and I remember reading his description about the type of people who like rafted the logs downstream. Like they'd be out on these logs at night with like jugs of whiskey and fiddles. And I'm like, those are raft guides. I know those people, So it was really fun to write the character of Moon. And you can meet every single one of these characters at any probably any outdoor outfitter, in the country. But there's Moon. She's sort of the hippie one with the patchouli oil and the star tattoos. There's Chip, Uncle Chip. He's like the old sort of burnt out sage who drinks far too much. The first time we meet Chip, this isn't a spoiler, it's chapter 1. Well, I don't know, should I?
It's not really a spoiler.
Okay. They find him duct taped to a paddle that his river guides have done when he passed out the
They
night
do
before.
have senses of humor.
Yeah.
They like to play lots of gags on each
Yeah,
other.
yeah,
Just
pranks.
stuff.
And then there's the characters of Randy and Pete, who are definitely like Northwoods, Wisconsin, mixed with this like surf culture, which is really beautiful and odd and fun. So it was great to write the guides, And some of the guides I've known, I mean, it's just stranger
Fact
than
stranger
fiction.
than fiction. Totally.
Yeah. I just want to tell river guide stories at this point, but maybe I shouldn't. I don't know.
So you had a little section I think you wanted to read out of the book, and then maybe you could open it up to some questions.
Yeah, sure. I have a couple passages here. I won't read them all. Maybe we should read, let's see. Well, we can read about Uncle Chip being duct taped to the paddle, or we can read about Sam's vision for the summer and how it's not stacking up. I think I'll start with Sam. He's one of the point of view characters, so I hope you enjoy Uncle Chip at a later time. So this is 60 pages in, and it's after Sam's first day on the river as the new owner of Woodchuck Rafting. That first day, they wake up in a camper that won't run. Uncle Chip, the businessman who sold it to them, is duct taped to a paddle and hung over. And there are customers coming in like 20 minutes, right? And the day is an absolute disaster on the river, okay? So this is a moment when Sam is going home to the campgrounds for the first night after his first day of work, basically. It was dusk. Sam aimed the bike for one of the gravel ruts in the driveway and pedaled out onto the road. The bike bounced happily down the gravel shoulder. The moon rose again, and the ditches smelled like the beginning of summer. At the park, Sam wove down the asphalt lanes between campsites. He was glad to see that Governor's was so clean and new. Swami would like it. He pedaled past campsite 4, Moon's place, squinting his eyes in the dark. A small teardrop camper sat behind the fire pit. At the other campsites, families laughed. At one, an old couple sat together in a double lawn chair, each with one bottle of beer. Site 22 was dark and silent, no campfire. Sam's back ached as he stood from the bike and laid it on its side. He was more tired than he realized. He quietly opened the screen door on the Brave and stepped inside. There were leftover dishes from supper, Wet swimsuits hung above the sink. The camper smelled like sunscreen. Sam smiled, hoped they had had a good day. Sam left his clothes in a heap and tried to climb into the bed next to Swami in the camper's rear bunk. The kids all slept on the other side of her. Everyone was breathing heavily. Swami stirred as Sam curled in near her back. Shh, she breathed. How was it? Sam whispered. Half asleep, grumpy, she elbowed Sam for more space and said, shh. Sam moved over, stayed awake in the dark a while. He could tell her all about the river tomorrow, the way the falls had felt. Sam had a vision for this summer, and today on the river had allowed him to hope. In his vision, he could see his smiling son wiping water from his eyes after a cannonball from the nose of a raft. He envisioned Swami sitting mid-boat with Dell, her legs tanned from weeks in the sun, her short shorts faded from all the river washings. Swami would be rubbing sunscreen into Dell's and Dee Dee's arms, while the little girls, even more blonde now, bounced and laughed on the tube in a raft. Swami would smile at Sam, and Sam would J-stroke the raft from the back, one sandaled foot propped up on a thwart, shoulders bronzed and strong again on his 100th raft trip of the summer. This is all his daydream. This is all my daydream. And then toward the end of the day, he'd have a cigar in his teeth. And of course, there'd be the coffer pressed down and overflowing with easy river money from busloads of guests. And then evenings would come. He and Swami would walk together to some riverside campsite. They'd cook fatty food over crackling coals. The kids would eat and sleep so easily and early. And then, when the whole world was quiet, Swami would wrap her golden legs around Sam and whisper to him how glad she was that he'd brought them all out here, for taking a risk on such a wonderful summer for them and the kids. And they would make love out there in the northern lights, Swami's eyes all lit up in the darkness with campfires and rivers and bright green stars. Sam heard her breathing heavily, falling back to sleep now. Darren snored. Through the camper blinds, he could see the black trunks of trees, beach towels on the table. Frogs sang near the lake, and his children breathed in and out, and Sam listened to them until he closed his eyes and joined them, the camper mattress carrying them off like a raft, drifting above black and pink and golden rocks. And that's the end of that. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much, everybody. So glad to be here in Milwaukee, and thank you all for coming out.
Yeah, this is great.
It's so nice to see you.
Does anyone have questions for Andy? No?
Yes, please. No, I absolutely think we can learn to write. Yeah. I think the only thing that's natural, as in you have it or you don't, is a natural interest to really, really stick with it for years and years and years. You know, some of us are interested enough in sentences to spend a month with them. Some of us aren't. Great, you know? But if you're interested, if people are passionate, I've seen improvement. I've worked with students for 3 years and even thought like, man, like it's just not sticking. And then all of a sudden, senior year, I had one student turn in a story and I thought, what happened? Right? Like this, whatever you did here, keep doing that. Yeah. So it's great. I like sharing with them the sort of journey of the actual writing life and how it's nothing like Instagram. You know, I tell them all about how I cried in my pickup truck after failing to sell my first novel. That happened on Highway 41, just north of Green Bay. 7 years writing a book, 7 years, all my eggs in one basket. And New York City said, you have written a long and boring novel. Yeah. Why? So, yeah. And just the stories of inspiration. It was a Flannery O'Connor essay, The Nature and Aim of Fiction, photocopied by my professor at Lawrence University. that I was feeding into a wood fire like a decade later to start a pine, to get warmed up. And it was that essay that I pulled out from the fire and didn't burn that sparked raft of stars. So yes, writing can be taught, and I absolutely love sharing the entirety of the experience with writers. Yeah, because I try to tell them, I hope you enjoy this itself. If you just enjoy the idea of becoming whatever, right? And this goes for anything, if you just enjoy the idea of becoming a physician, like you better enjoy positioning. You know what I mean? Like that's what it's made of. So yeah. Yeah. But I love teaching. And Wittenberg University is a little school, kind of very similar to Lawrence University if you've been there. And it's a good spot. If you know any prospective writers, have them take a look at our program. Thanks. You had your hand up. Sure. The only thing I'm nervous about is how they're going to pronounce the word pasty. Yeah, because pasties make it into the novel, and that one gets like
Yeah.
gets Chicago South. They don't know what those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lincoln Hope, the same actor who narrated Raft to Stars, is also doing True North. So I have total hope that Lincoln's going to do awesome. Yeah. I don't foresee him doing it over the top and quaint or yeah. Yeah. Yep. But I do not listen to the entirety of the audiobooks. Nick Butler gave the best answer that I've ever heard. Someone asked him once, Nick Butler, Little Faith, Godspeed. They said, you listen to your own books? And he said, no, because I'm going to be listening to my book and I'm going to pull up at a stoplight with the window down and my buddy's going to pull up in the lane next to me and I'm going to be listening to my own audiobook. It's like, what kind of jerk listens to his own audiobook? So yeah, I agree. Yes, please. It was much harder for me because a lot of the imposter syndrome and is anyone ever going to talk to me anymore, right? Kind of thing. Or like, are they going to like this? Did I just get really, really lucky? And then I shared this with Maxwell over dinner, but the very first draft of True North had to be almost 80% rewritten. So I wrote the entire manuscript and delivered it. So I thought to echo HarperCollins, I'm like, here it is, book 2. And the editor's like, man, this ain't it. This is not good. And she was absolutely correct. I wrote a story where it was like the climax was basically like a guy with marital problems who decides to take Zoloft and things get mildly better. That might be like a really good choice in life, but that makes for a dumb novel. You know what I mean? Right? There were long therapy scenes and things, and my editor's like, no. So that really scared me because I thought, oh my gosh, like no one is going to talk to me again, And I asked her, I said, how common is it for people trying to write their second book to do this big of a rewrite? Like, talk to me, Alan, And she said, it's almost 100%. Something weird happens where the second book just goes boink, So that was hard. But I knew she was right. So I chopped 2 or 3 characters completely out of the book, added 2 more, a completely new layer woven into the plot. Basically, the only thing that stayed was like Sam and Swami go north in a camper and hit a deer, So it was difficult, yeah. But I'm thankful. I'm so thankful for it. It's just great. I'm staying in this lovely hotel in Milwaukee. Yeah, got cookies. If you guys want a cookie from my sister-in-law later. Yes, sir. No, for sure. Yes, I think if left to my own devices, I tend to write like really boring navel gazing stuff. I've found like it's a pattern now, you know? That first novel, I spent 7 years on it. It's never been sold. It's in a sock drawer somewhere. And that's the one that New York said, ugh, like, dude, plot, like learn it. You know what I mean? Um, and so I learned it with Raft of Stars. I'm like, well, whatever. Like, they're not going to call this one boring. Like, page 10, that young boy is going to shoot that father and off they go. Right. So, and then, kind of being relaxed, feeling like, okay, I've got 3 years to write True North. And I'm writing like, like gazing at my house plants with a pen and paper and, you know, thinking I'm yielding to the flow, man. And when in actuality, I'm just navel gazing again. Yeah. That first book had I had like 17-page long chapters where two guys would just like sit still next to each other and like discuss God. That's not good, in a book, right? Um, Same thing here. I ended up with these 12-page long chapters where like a person just sits across from their therapist and discusses God. I don't know. Like it just, yeah. So I've learned that. I have started to, without the help of, unless someone's kind of poking me and reminding me, like, dude, storytelling, storytelling. I tend to just daydream my way into my own navel. Yeah. Yeah. I find I have to be really deliberate about plot. That's what storytelling means to me. So like storytelling is, O'Connor says, it has to be concrete, it has to be dramatic, and it has to be emotionally significant. And those are like three pillars that are just inexhaustible, and we mine them in all my classes. But that one about drama, like, no, you need an inciting incident that can rise and result in a new normal for the character at the end of the chapter or end of the novel. If not, you're not telling a story. Like maybe you're telling like a French art film or something, right? But the plot is so important. And I think in a lot of graduate programs, plot is sort of talked about, or it's not talked about. It's treated like a four-letter word, like how low brow. We're not going to have discussions about plot. And that's a real disservice, I think, because there are yes, there's not formulas of storytelling, but there are conventions of story. We go to the movie and we get our box of dots, right? And like, there's the opening mountain scene and the wind and the eagle, and we eat the dots and we say, this is going to be good. Yeah, yes. Here, right? Put the feet up. And then 15 minutes later, if it was still like the eagle and the mountains and the wind is, we're like, what's this about? It's not a story. So plot for me is storytelling. And I tend to be plotless unless I'm reminded about it. Yeah.
I think we could take one more question if you want to.
I just might have a comment. I can't imagine exciting college classes and take those different.
Oh, it's
That is
it's fun, and we try to make it experiential. So this semester we're reading To Build a Fire by Jack London, and then we're going to go out in the college green and like start fires without matches. Last spring, we read The River by Peter Heller, which is a great whitewater sort of canoe adventure, and I took them all whitewater kayaking in Springfield. There's a nice whitewater play park. I'm like, you don't have to do this. This is, I'm not going to force you to get in a kayak, but it was great. And we went out and like experienced flipping over perfectly good boats. So I agree. I'm thankful to be happy about it. Yeah, it's fun. It's a great school. It's a great spot. Can we
do
get a
yell it
question?
too, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay.
So I have one last question. Oh, do we have one more? Okay.
Sure. No, I don't think it did. I went in the military. I like mechanic. mechanical stuff, and I went in as a jet mechanic. I did it for 4 years. I went to Afghanistan. I did not like the military. I came out. When I came out, I tried to do another practical thing. I was going to Fox Valley Technical College to become a paramedic. Very, very interesting until I got in the back of an ambulance and like had to touch real people in real trouble. I did not have the stomach for that. You know, not to put a fine point on anything, but if your paramedic is gagging, it inspires no confidence, none. And I'm like, I don't think. And it was actually a night. My big brother actually helped me make the decision to be brave enough to try being an English major one night. So
Kudos to him, right?
yeah, thanks. Thanks, man.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we had been drinking, but it was well worth it, man.
So I have one last question. Coming off of the holidays and teaching, do you have a book that inspires you that you like to gift to people, or what is your favorite book that you would recommend?
Okay. There's a handful. I'm teaching another class, and I call it the Feel Good Book Club. And it's contemporary novels with happy endings. And the whole point is like, do the stories we tell ourselves matter? Yes, we all know how life can have bad endings, right? But books can provide this sort of alternative, yeah? What things could be. And True North is that. No spoilers, but I want to write books that will leave you feeling hopeful. Some books that do that for me, some books that I teach in that class. One is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. So good. She deserves every bit of the accolades that she's received in the last year and a half. That book rocks. Kitchens of the Great Midwest, J. Ryan Straddle. Awesome. And Nick Butler, although as we discussed in dinner, the titles matter, right? So I would say Nick Butler's book, Little Faith, while it doesn't have the happiest sort of ending, that's a hopeful story. Yeah, that's sort of, that whole thing reads like a memento mori, right? Hope in this sort of the pain of reality. Yeah, yeah. Nick Butler's Godspeed, good novel, not happy ending.
Not a happy ending, no.
Right?
not a
Yeah,
happy
that one
ending.
isn't going to make it into that class. I like those. Those are the authors. And then Marilyn Robinson's Gilead is like my go-to book that I would give to someone I really cared about. But I've done that before. And a lot of people don't like that book. They're like, gosh, I can't get through the first 15 pages. Slow. I'm like, yeah. In a way, like that book feels like a comfortable armchair, you know? You sink into that puppy. I'll rest and then I'll sleep, she says. Yeah.